Okay, the meeting is now back in public session. Before we begin, can I remind members, witnesses and those in the public gallery to make sure the mobile phones are completely turned off, please, as interfere with the broadcasting system. I'd like to welcome here today Mr. Ray Doyle from Irish Cooperative Organisation Society, ICOS, and Mr. Seamus Scanlon Seamus Scanlon from Weekly Calf Company, and Liz Scanlon from Weekly Calf Company. Thank you for coming before the committee today to discuss with the committee issues concerning live exports. This is part of a discussion we're having at the moment within our committee as regards the future of the beef industry, and we've heard a lot about the difficulties in the whole sector over the last number of weeks, and we've decided as a committee to see what we can do to try and move things on as a collective. So I'd like to welcome you here today. Just before I begin, I have to bring to your attention witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect to the evidence you give to the committee. Wherever you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter to qualify a privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that where possible you should not criticise or make charges against any person or entity by name or in such ways to make him or her identifiable. Members are reminded of long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that members should not comment on, criticise or make charges against either person outside the House or an official leader by name or in such ways to make him or her identifiable. Mr. Doyle, now I'll ask you to make an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Ireland has over 6.7 million cattle, producing approximately 2.4 million calves annually. This results in almost 1.7 million cattle being presented for slaughter, of which we export almost 90%. Almost 1.8 million cattle and 750,000 sheep are traded through the livestock marts in 2018, and we can have between 200,000 and 300,000 of live exports depending on the year. This trade in live animals is vital to maintaining competition in the marketplace and acts as a countervailing force against the beef processing sector, which is dominated by 4 private companies. Ireland has always been a provider of live cattle for export to Northern Ireland, the United Kingdom and other European countries, and third country exports such as North Africa and Turkey. As a nation, we are only consuming approximately 10% of what we produce, and in 2018 Ireland produced over 480,000 tonnes of beef meat for export. The United Kingdom, on the other hand, is only approximately 75% self-sufficient in beef meat and must import approximately 350,000 tonnes of additional beef to satisfy national demand. Ireland supplies the vast majority of this imported beef meat, as you would expect due to our proximity. In 2018, Ireland produced and exported over 250,000 tonnes of beef meat to the UK, representing almost 70% of the total imports. With Brexit only 6 weeks away, we should be promoting as much live exports as possible to all possible countries to counteract the potential drop in sales volumes into the UK, especially if a hard Brexit were to initiate large tariffs on beef and sheep meat. It will not be in the Irish beef and sheep farmers' best interest that this valuable source of competition is lost, with little or no real scientific argument to back it up, other than emotive stances taken by NGOs. The beef processing industries and large multiples would be delighted with a ban on live export, as it would allow them to stifle and manipulate the prices that the primary producer receives as much as possible. The meat industry and UK multiples are fully aware that when live exports are buoyant, prices rise, and by ensuring the live trade is hindered ensures a depressed live trade and cheaper raw material price for them. Irish and all European farmers need to get a fair and true market value for their stock, and this can only happen when you have multiple avenues of competition for livestock. Irish livestock marts adhere to stringent EU legislation, and so too do our live exporters, and rightly so, as maintaining high welfare standards is not just the right thing to do, it is good business, as any animal that performs poorly or potentially dies during transport represents an economic loss, and nobody wants this to occur. It's hugely important that the live export sector is heavily regulated, and it is under EC 1 of 2005, which is enacted to the letter of the law by our Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. If all EU countries ensured compliance with 1/2005, the NGOs would have very little cause for complaint with EU transporters of cattle and sheep. This is the real issue with live animal transport in the EU. Current legislation has not been enforced in some Eastern European member states, and the reaction by NGOs and some members of the EU Parliament is to simply ban live transport. This is flawed logic. The consumer demands high animal welfare standards, and ICOS agrees with this approach, but we need to promote, foster and enhance full compliance in other EU countries. Also, as simply banning live transport of all animals could potentially cause bigger animal welfare issues in the future. For example, if the lesser quality dairy calves could not be exported to Holland and Spain, as they have been for the last few years, what would happen to all calf prices? Would this trigger animal welfare issues where animals are worthless? What we currently have in the form of Regulation 1/2005 does exactly as it states, the protection of animals during transport, and as long as Member States abide by the regulation, there is no animal welfare reason to crudely ban all live exports. Our Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine enacts a very stringent interpretation of 1/2005, and while on a practical level some exporters and farmers mightn't agree with all aspects of it, it has and will safeguard our live exports into the future. Everything has to be done in full compliance with the regulations regarding stocking densities, disease status, planned routes and adherence to regulated unloading larages, for example in France, where calves are fed, given a rest period and then reloaded. This all has to be and is currently properly managed. All live transport, but especially from Ireland, comes under huge scrutiny from prominent animal welfare groups during the beef calf export season. There are animal welfare lobby groups and action groups that monitor us very closely. In addition to the regulatory bodies whose job it is to supervise this activity, so too is it in the public eye. Some lobby groups intentionally stir up emotive arguments on the subject of live transport of young calves in particular, as they are usually only a few weeks old, but these animals are managed properly during transport. It is vital we continue to manage these and all animals in the best possible manner in order to protect these markets, and we want to purchase Irish livestock because of our reputation for raising quality livestock. It's a reputation that we as a country have always had and want to protect.
Thank you, Mr. Scallon, I understand you were making an opening statement, is that correct?
Okay, yep. What I want to speak about is the issue of the exports at the moment, about how many calves per week we can get out at the moment, and about the ships that is going out at the moment. So, at the present moment of time, we can, first I suppose I'll start off with, there was 166,000 calves exported last year out of Ireland, yeah? The way we're looking at it this year, we are thinking on the lines that there'll be more than 200,000 calves to go out this year because of the price of the beef and different issues, and farmers and new entrants coming into the dairy sector. So we're going to have an awful lot more calves to go out. Now, the issues that we are having at the moment with our business is that we are limited now to space in France, in Cherbourg, when our calves comes off, that there's only 2 licensed premises in France, and of these 2 licensed premises, they're capable of handling 4,000 calves a day. So that's 3 times a week. So they're saying that they can take 12,000 calves a week. What I have been saying to different organisations that I've been speaking to, that's not 100% right, because we're leaving out the fact that we have calves coming from the UK, from Northern Ireland, say from Northern Ireland, yeah, and we are receiving about, coming down here, going out into ships, about 1,500 a week. So it's leaving capacity for 10,500 calves a week. Now, when we have our calves to go at the moment, in 2 weeks' time, we're going to be in full swing with the calves, right? And for us to get 10,500 calves out where we should be at this time of the year now, with what is happening with all the numbers and all, we should be, I suppose, peaking at maybe 18,000 to 20,000 calves now for 5 or 6 of the busiest weeks. But there's no space in the lairage. The lairage is like a hotel over there in France for feeding the calves, so the calves come off and they rest for 12 hours and then continue on their journey. So the 2 lairages that has passed at the moment, right, can only take 4,000 calves. So then we take off the north calves, so that's 3,500 calves, right? We can't get the calves out because there's no room out there. We have the customers for the calves. We have the capacity to handle the calves in our export points. We have the trucks to bring them. The ships is not a problem at the moment, right? The problem is the lairage, right? So there has been a lot of discussions here that this new ship is coming in from Irish Ferries, and this ship is going to sail on alternative days. So from October of this year, I've met farming organisations and some people from the government, I suppose, and spoke to them about the issues that we were going to have last October. I was the only one that raised the issues to say that I see a problem coming with the whole export business this year, and everybody said that, oh, the ship is coming here and it's going to go on alternative days and we'll be all right. I said, that's not true. This ship is not coming until May. and in May it is no good to us in May because the numbers of calves will be, the markets will be flooded. So the problem at the moment is when the weather comes bad, and which it came this week, that there was no sailing for the calves on Thursday, so the boat went out on Friday. One ship took no calves out because they felt that the weather was not correct for them to sail. The ship is not as big as the Stena one in Rosslare, so the boat left Rosslare with the calves, packed to the guns, right? We went to the Lairage, right? No more room. We had another 2 trucks of calves. We couldn't send them, so that was okay that day. They could take the capacity was there. We had 4,000 calves. All went. When we get 1 or 2 bad days, right, we're going to have serious welfare issues in Ireland here with the calves, right? Because these farms can't handle the calves, to hold the calves over. We can't get our hands, we can't buy the calves off the farmers because we can't export them, because we've no room at the far side. And the whole problem with this issue is, right, that 2 people have 2 lairages in France, and these 2 people, our livelihoods, every farmer is depending on 2 men looking after all our business in France. Yeah, so we need to have a backup for when the contingency plan for when the weather is bad, that we are able to say, okay, the weather is going to be bad this week, that we have a contingency plan here, that instead of 4,000 calves, that we can use the alternative lairage, which we were able to use for the last number of years, which is 4 hours further up than Cherbourg, right? And because of the legislation that has came in, we can't use that lairage anymore. So that's meaning that there's 4,000 calves per sailing that has a capacity of 4,000 calves extra, but now we can't go to it. Yeah. So we're snookered everywhere. Now the calves is coming. The price of the calves is going to collapse in Ireland. This year, with the price of the beef, there's going to be an awful lot of extra calves coming on the market. There's no feeling in the farmers to buy because we're losing 200, 300 euros a carcass on the cattle. People aren't going to buy the calves. The farmers that were keeping the calves are not going to keep the calves, the dairy farmers, the extra one, because there's no money in it and everything is so costly to keep, right? So what are we going to do with the calves, right? So we need to find a plan of what we are going to do. So I'm hoping coming here today that you guys will be able to look into it and see about an alternative plan for first the weather, but also that we have a plan in place, right, where that 2 people, we have 2 people, not controlling, that wouldn't be a nice thing to say, but 2 people, or they're doing their business there, they have their lairages there.
Can I ask you, those 2 lairages in Cherbourg,
yes,
they're privately owned?
Privately owned.
Okay.
Yes.
And do all your exports go to Cherbourg?
Yeah, everything that goes, all the calves that leave Ireland goes to France. Right, okay. Sorry, pulls into Cherbourg.
And from there they're distributed
and
elsewhere.
then the rest for 12 hours, and then they go forward.
Okay.
And then in England, in the UK, we were able to go through the UK, but there's a lot of problems with some of the ships in England. They won't take the calves. They won't take the calves out because of the animal rights and things like that, and they don't want to. And for here as well, it's making a big problem for us.
Obviously, live exports are crucial for Ireland.
Yes, and there's another problem now as well that is coming down the line, and we must address it and get the people who's representing us to look into this. Is in Europe they are now looking. We ship the calves out, 3 decks of calves out on the trucks, so 100 calves to each deck, so it's 300 calves, right? Now, different people in Europe is trying to bring in a law where in Ireland or anywhere the calves are coming, you can only 2 decks the calves. So it's going to be 33% less. So coming back to the farmers again, we're going to go out with, it's not going to be me that's going to lose, it's going to be the farmers that's going to lose, because we can only go out with 2/3 of the calves if this legislation comes in.
This is European legislation.
Pardon me?
This is European legislation.
Well,
too.
the people are trying to get it brought into legislation, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but I suppose because we're an island, we want to be looking to see what status or what can we get for to be able to get our calves out. But what I see, what's coming this year, is going to have a devastating impact on the whole cattle business. And all these calves that's left at home are going to have to be reared or whatever, and not reared they're going to be killed or shot, right? So we're going to have a big look into the whole welfare costing of the whole situation, what's coming down the road. And when the weather comes, we are going to have a serious problem, sir.
But going back to the Sherbrooke issue,
Yes.
2 larages there.
2 larages.
Is there a possibility of other space being made available out there?
Yes, I had a meeting. My daughter and myself went to France in October again. We went out to see the guy who owns the lairage. We spoke to him to see about what did he need to get the lairage, to get extra space in the lairages. Pardon? To expand the lairages. And what he said to me, and was true enough, he's 57 or 8 years of age, and he said to me, I don't want to go in to have all, I've spent enough money on these whole business area. He's excellent setup, have to say, top of the range, welfare, everything done 100% to have, no one could complain about his workmanship or the way he looks after the calves or his premises, right? But he said that he hadn't got the money to put into the lairages, right? So I suggested that we could go maybe to some of the organisations here, or the farming organisations, that we all put some money in together to see can we build extra spaces in the lairage out there, right? Or the other thing is we want to look at, we need definitely to have 2 more lairages operating in France, in Sherbrooke. If anything happens, right, if anything happened to any of those guys tomorrow morning, where would we go with our calves? Or if they close down, where would we go? How would we get our calves out? Because we can only travel 919, right? And we're at our best to get to the lairage in time to keep within the letter of the law of EU legislation. Yeah.
Okay. Members, Deputy Cahill, or sorry, Deputy McConalogue was first, and then Deputy Cahill, Deputy Kenny.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I'd like to welcome Mr. Skellin and Elizabeth and Seamus here, as well as Ray Doyle on behalf of Oireachtas, and thank you for taking the time to come in and present to us on this issue. Both of you have very clearly outlined the absolute importance of the live export sector to our beef industry, and also given the massive pressure that's on beef farmers at the moment in terms of prices, coming on the back of difficult years, but this being the most difficult. There is a massive issue facing us unless the live exports and the number of calves getting out of the country grows on previous years, because the number of calves being produced, particularly off the dairy herd, is certainly growing. And unless we find additional outlets for them and additional volume going in live exports, then we're going to only add to the difficulties we already have domestically in terms of beef price. Can I ask you, just in relation to, you've very clearly outlined there the difficulty in relation to the 2 lairages, and that seems to be the main blockage in relation to additional numbers. Now, so in relation to this particular year, and you said that this year we should be in a position to actually to export 200,000 calves. That's right. So up to this point in time, and obviously we're probably right now, or I mean, what would the peak time be? March, would it be? Yeah,
well, the peak time would be coming in now into March.
Into March. Yeah. So in terms of how it's going so far, I mean, where are things at this point compared to where it was last year? And I mean, unless things change and unless there's additional lairage capacity actually sourced in the very short term, what sort of numbers are likely to be exported over the coming number of months? Just another couple of points in terms of how many would be operating in the same space that yourselves do in terms of actually exporting calves. How many in total sort of would be in that business? In relation to Mr. Doyle's contribution, and thanks again for it, and I know Oireachtas and indeed yourself do a lot of important work in this area. An issue that has come up previously in relation to mart rules and the gathering of cattle for live exports, and I know some will be sourced at farm, but in relation to a couple of issues, so for example the 4 movement rule and the 30-day rule, how much of an impact or is that, how relevant is that in relation to the live export and the difficulty that is being experienced around that? In relation to live export licences, and the conditions on the licences going to various countries. Is there many outstanding issues there in relation to the restrictions that are on licences that may be unnecessarily cumbersome, or that would be more onerous on ourselves than there might be on other live exporting countries? Is there any issues such as that we should be turning our attention to? And also then in relation to other opportunities for developing further live export routes and markets, is there particular markets there which, with more attention at national level or with some policy impetus put in, that we actually could seek development of and progress on? And then just to Mr. Scallon, you mentioned the issue in relation to domestically in the event of bad weather. What exactly needs to be done at Irish level domestically here to be able to provide the capacity for the disruption that weather would actually lead to? And just another point: is there alternative ports other than Cherbourg that would be an option at all, or is Cherbourg really the only option? I know timelines are very tight in relation to the legislation, and come back to my initial point, the capacity and potential for how, in the short term, we can increase that lairage, the lairage facilities in the other end.
Deputy, we'll take some more questions. Is that okay with you before I come back to you? It's okay. Deputy Cahill, please.
Thanks, Chairman. I'd like to thank both gentlemen for their presentation and welcome Elizabeth here as well. I suppose the importance of live exports, and it's so essential for the beef to try and put the beef market into balance. We just can't overestimate the importance of it. I just, Mr. Scanlon there talked about 200,000 calves as kind of being a target for us. He said we have the ferries and the lairage is the issue. But is there more potential for that market there? Like, is there other countries going in there into the veal units? Is there more potential if we had the transport facilities to get extra calves out? Because 40,000 cattle a head per week being killed, to take 200,000 calves out isn't actually going to be enough cattle to get our system to bring our market back into an equilibrium. So how much extra potential is there, and how much extra customers is there? Can we displace other countries there to go into those veal units? So that's the first question I'd like to ask. And you have said that the ferries aren't, that the boats aren't an issue, and the lairage, and like Deputy McConalogue said there, is another port an option? And you talked about the timelines, and I'd just like you to expand a bit on that, Chairman, as regards the timelines. And is it possible to go into, say, a Dutch port with calves? And how far have you to travel from Cherbourg to the veal units when you can reload after the rest period? How far of a journey then have you to travel? And I think the density on trucks, I think this is another red herring to make it uneconomical for us to export. We had this argument, I suppose, 7 to 10 years ago about the densities on trucks, and we made very costly alterations to the trucks that we were used to take to the continent, and it added greatly to the cost of taking them there. And like in a previous life, I remember going to feedlots in Spain and Italy and looking at our weanlings there, and we had problems with them at the time going to those feedlots in Spain and Italy, and we had to get our house in order here, because at the end of the day, if you don't arrive on the continent with a calf or a weanling or an older animal in a healthy condition, you won't hold your customers too long. No one that's going to feed stock wants to have them arriving sick and in an unhealthy state. And we had that problem with our weanlings back, I suppose, 10, 12 years ago. And we had to go to make sure our weanlings were weaned and vaccinated, and we got that issue sorted. So if calves don't arrive in a good condition, you won't hold on to your customers too long. And I think the people that are arguing about this, I think should appreciate that. But just to Mr. Doyle, older animals, we seem to have lost. We have no outlet at the moment for older animals, for animals from 12 months up to be exported. And like, is there any possibilities of any of those markets opening up for us? And as said about the whalings, is there any possibility in expanding the amount of whalings that can go? And I suppose especially the dairy type whalings that are kept on farms, could they go at that stage? Because I suppose with bull beef at the moment, we see an absolutely, I suppose, I don't know what word I'd use, but the way the factories are treating the producers of Frisian bull beef at the moment, it's well, it's to get him killed rather than the price is the issue. And farmers with bulls coming to 24 months of age, they're on their knees begging meat processors to take the bulls off them. And they're actually making less than what a culled cow coming out of the suckler herd would make at the present time. So is there any possibility of getting live markets open for that type of stock that would put extra pressure on the processors? And another question I'd like to ask Board BIA, and Board BIA as a promotional body for securing markets for us. And this question to both of you, would you be happy with Board BIA's efforts in securing extra markets for us for live exports, or is their whole focus on processed meat? And would you feel that there should be more resources put in? There is more resources put in. Is it possible to drive up these numbers? Because the reality is, dairy cow numbers are going to continue to increase, and going to increase, fairly significantly. So we have been killing, I suppose, for 3 months at this stage, we've been killing nearly 40,000 cattle per week, and it's as plain as a nose in your face at this stage that while the factories can kill them, they can't sell them at an economical price for us. It's not practical for farmers. It's not financially viable for farmers to produce beef at the price that's being paid. So while it would be great if we hit that target of 200,000. Even that, unfortunately, isn't going to be sufficient to put the market back into equilibrium. So, the rest period of 12 hours, that's, to me, that's an extremely reasonable time. And knowing a calf after 12 hours rest will get up in the peak condition if he's fed in a warm bed. He's going to get up in peak condition to continue his journey. But I would just. If we have seen these razors before, and I don't know what, you say that you have to travel an extra you could get extra layerage space 4 hours further from Sherbrooke, but I said, how near would that be to your final destination? And would it be impossible? Is it possible, to get into a Dutch port, or how far over the present regulations would you be in travel time if you had to try and get into a Dutch port, which would be near your final destination?
Please.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'd like to thank you for coming in and making the presentations today. It's clear, I think, the live export market is something that is needed in order to maintain the price for farmers, and we've all recognised that. I'm just interested in, one of the key points that's been brought up here is about the whole issue of layerage. And you were saying that the time factor and how long they stop for the 12 hours rest and feeding and etc. and then they move on again. How much of a journey have they got to go after that? In general? And if there was additional layerage in place, would it have to be exactly there, or are there alternatives in that region? The issue of I suppose the regulations around the export licence, and particularly I'm thinking of, and Deputy Cahill mentioned it about the heavier cattle, about finished cattle, and I know that Algeria and other markets have been opened up to some extent, but I think there are difficulties there at the moment that they're not actually getting cattle out there, and I'd like to maybe explore that a little bit and see what needs to be done in order to ensure that can happen and can happen safely. And I think it is vital, and and reference has been made to all the various NGOs and lobby groups, etc., that are always looking at this and under a microscope as to what's happening and all of that. But I think, in actual fact, it may not be a bad thing, because it shows the world and everywhere else the quality of cattle, the quality of animal that comes from Ireland, the standards that we have, that we can really meet the highest level of standards. So I don't think that's really a problem. That the scrutiny isn't the problem. The problem really is making sure that we can have the infrastructure in place to deal with the regulations that are there. The issues of the boats as well. if you have to go those further journeys to North Africa, etc., is there a difficulty there in getting the boats and getting the transportation in place for that? Or will this new boats that's coming online, will that assist that? The point that was made in regard to the additional cattle, and we all see the expansion of the dairy herd, and while it's certainly very good for people that are in the dairy business, they're making plenty of money, and the excess calves that's coming from that market is going to pose a problem unless they can be got out of the country, as far as I can see, because there seems to be no other route for them. And the issue here is, have we got markets? Can we find markets without having to go the very long journeys? That's one of, I think, the key questions, because if you don't have to go the very long journeys, you mitigate against an awful lot of the criticism. Because a lot of the criticism is when you're talking about going to places way over the far end of Eastern Europe or further. You know, if you can keep it closer, I think you can overcome a lot of those issues. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chairman.
What was the maximum number of calves per week that was exported last year?
I'll come back to I take these two questions first, and I'll come back to Deputy or Senator Daly has a question as well, so we'll come back. Is that all right? Okay, Mr. Scallon, we'll come back to you first of all.
Okay.
On the questions. All right, when you're ready.
Well, you were asking about the last. You were asking about is there other markets that we can find, yeah, for the livestock, yeah, for the export. The answer to that is yes, and the answer to that is in Europe as well, right? There's good markets there. The problem at the moment, if I can be allowed to say it, is right, that I feel that the markets are there, but all the people who's involved in the exporting are not gelling correctly to follow these markets up. Yeah, there's very, very good markets in Poland, and we're not using Poland. It's in the EU, and we're not using it to get into the seller cattle. But then we can go then to the Balkans, right? The Balkans import a lot of calves from different countries, from Russia and from everywhere, right? We went out to Bosnia 18 months ago to have a look at my son and myself, and I was amazed at the way that they were feeding the cattle, and the big feedlots is out there. Now, I'm not saying big feedlots like 400 and 500 cattle, right? But yeah, the feedlots was out there. They were very, very interested in coming. There was no problem. I went to the Department of Agriculture. They went out of their way, I have to say this, in Dublin, to get the licences approved, to look at all the stuff that had to be done. They had meetings with us. They couldn't have been any more helpful. But the problem is, with a lot of these countries, is the ships, right? And the problems that we have to have a look at, and that we really want to investigate, is that if we can get the ships in here, first of all, we need to have the likes of Board B and different people all coming together, sitting down with a group of people, right, with ICOS, with everybody, that we can see what we can get together to explore these markets, because they are there and the cattle can go. But we need to be able to get more people in the industry in, say that a ship comes in here and it can carry 4,000 cattle, right? That ship can be chartered out to maybe 10 people instead of one person, so it's creating a lot of activity in the market, and it's rising the price of the cattle up. There's an awful lot of things can be done if we start, and after this week we're to start and form a committee to explore where we can go with the cattle. Yeah.
Mr. Scallon, can I ask this very quick question there? When you're talking about people coming together, you're talking about fellow exporters like yourself?
Fellow exporters, the likes of ICOS sitting down with us as well, right, because they have the market system. People from Board B, yeah, okay. I feel one of the questions was asked a minute ago. I feel that with the exports, right, that we don't get a fair crack at the whip with Board B. That they're for the meat industry, they're not for the export industry, right? And we pay them a levy every week of €1.90 per calf, per animal that leaves. And we need to be looking, they should be looking at people, to bring people in from the Balkans and different countries like this, and from Poland right into Ireland, or bringing the right people out to see where we can go ahead with it, to get all these people sitting down together. We've never got the exporters sitting down together, but now at this stage, the meat plant, Beef Plan are putting together, they're trying to put together a forum there that we can get the exporters, that they're going to get us in to represent us, right, to speak on our behalf and everything, that we can form an association, yeah?
Yeah. Have you, as a group of exporters on your own right, tried to form a group together?
No.
Would you see it as being beneficial?
It'll be very beneficial, right, but we'll have to get somebody to sit down to set it all up for us, yeah? We've never sat down together to look at this because I suppose the business is in, everyone thinks that he's going to get better than another lad and he wants more, and instead of sitting down and looking at all the markets. And this is the reason I said that if the ships comes in, instead of one guy having 3,000 on the ship, that 10 people can share that ship together and 10 people can afford to put 300 or 400 cattle on it. We can all look at the markets.
So how does it work at the moment? You have 4,000 calves to go this week.
Yes.
Your competitor, whoever it may be, has 4,000 calves to go.
Yes.
How do you get onto the ship before Mr. X?
Well, I suppose it's all, a lot of the bookings would have been down to, you have business going on with the companies out there for the last 20 years, right? But the way it is at the moment, it doesn't matter who you are now, they have to share the bookings all out with everybody. It's not a case that if I'm going to the Larrys for the last 20 years, right? Every Saturday, we're unique in the way we do our business because we buy all our calves off farm. So we export all our calves mainly of a Friday, and we do maybe 5 or 6 trucks or whatever. 4, 5, 6 trucks of a Friday, of a Saturday out. Now we can't do that. We can't put our plan together because all the places be taken up. But there was one other point that I left out, a very important point there, was of the 3 sailing days that we have, Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, right? A lot of the calves that goes to Holland of a Thursday, right, is if we're entering into the middle of Holland, right, we have a serious problem because of their religious beliefs. They will not accept the calves coming into Saturday evening, right? And Sunday they have to work at the calves. So Thursday going to Holland is going to be, I won't say a non-runner, but people don't want the calves landing on a Sunday. They have to do the work on them. So we're really working here with 2 days to export all the calves, a Tuesday and a Saturday. Okay. So how we're going to find the way around that, I don't know. Okay.
Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try and remember what all you said, so I'll try and take us one at a time. Deputy McConalogue, the live exports and the 4 moves, that's affecting our trade of cattle to the UK. And that is the UK labelling regulations that has stymied that particular trade. So the 4 moves and the 70 days, which is the basis on the bonus payments that the factories initiate, which we've been here before discussing, is a construct of the UK multiples. Now, how that will change after the 29th of March remains to be seen, because will they change that? Will they move back to no stipulations whatsoever? Will that allow our free trade of live animals now to reoccur in the UK? Probably not, because we'll have tariff on the live animals just as we will on the dead animals. So the 4 moves there is definitely hindering live export of cattle to the UK, and has done so. If you look at the Board BF figures for the last 10 years in a row, we have steadily been decreasing our live exports to Northern Ireland and the UK on the back of the tightening of the labelling regulations and the as I said in my opening remarks, the tightening of the multiples on the beef processing sector to try and stymie beef prices best they can. The 30-day rule, our TB rule on the export of the weaning trade in particular, that again has been an EU construct that's there since the year 2000 and before it, I think. That doesn't greatly affect the trading and export of a lot of the weanings out of the country. There was a change there 2 years ago in the interpretation of sales of animals directly from a mart, but we still managed to facilitate that through negotiation from the Department of Agriculture with Europe on that, and it doesn't greatly hamper that trade currently. But it's still an extra layer that to our live exports. And again, it's for another day. But the push from the government on the TB forum to perhaps eradicate it by 2030, well, that will greatly transform our ability to export animals and that, because there are certain requirements, even for carcass beef, to certain Chinese markets that do not want or have stipulations on sourcing animals from animals that had TB, but also from, and this is drifting into another part of your question and another deputy's question, on the export to the North African countries. There is certain stipulations there in the veterinary certificates from some of the North African countries on TB and when animals could have had a breakdown. The export of calves to, the lairage issues then, Deputy, which you've described as well, and it's been described much better by Seamus in that. The lairage issue in France and also the export of the calves, which is a byproduct of the dairy industry, the type of animals going to the veal units. And we have had an extra 300,000 of those type of animals born in the country over the last 5 years since quotas ceased. So I would contend it's actually a national issue and we're going to have to grapple with it. It has been described to you that we have a problem in the lairage in France, but this lairage is merely a disembarkation lairage. It is merely really a shed that the animals need to exit the truck, be fed and watered, be able to rest for 12 hours and put back on the truck. It's not a control point. We don't have to have IT systems or a rigorous inspection by department staff, either the French authorities or the Irish authorities. So I know I'm giving a simplistic answer, but because I believe it's a national interest issue, if again the Department of Agriculture could in simple terms rent a lairage or even large areas of sheds, that would do to be able to actually ensure that these animals have disembarked the trucks, would be more than adequate for this particular issue. And this issue, as is outlined clearly, is an issue for about 6 to 8 weeks of the year. For the rest of the year there is no issue, because the capacity at 4,000, albeit low, is more than adequate to soak up the volume of calves there. So we have an issue for perhaps 6 weeks of the year. So it's completely understandable, I think, from the Frenchman's point of view who's running these two lairages. Why would he provide a service to Irish farmers for simply 6 weeks? It's a business decision. So because it's a business decision, and I believe it's a national issue for us, we're going to have to perhaps solve it rather than looking abroad to solve it. Even though the problem will be solved on French soil, I think it's going to be ourselves that's going to have to solve this issue.
How close to the port does the lairage facilities have to be?
Again, I'll let Seamus, I'll defer to the expertise of Seamus in that it's a time issue rather than a distance, as far as I'm aware. And and the problem is they more or less have to hit the greater Cherbourg area. So you could perhaps extend it, again, Seamus, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 20 or 30 kilometres further south would be it, because you'd be caught in time. And the problem with the time is that's administered by the French authorities. So they're the people administering the penalties to our transporters. So the French authorities won't allow us to sneak past, for want of a better phrase. Not that we want to. The transport times are there and our best practice. Another one of your questions was exports, Board B, other exports and Board B issues. Board B is our national authority for marketing our beef and lamb, and that means both the dead and the live. And the problem we have is and again it dovetails into a question that Deputy Cahill raised. There's an old adage at market manager and dealer levels: you need a good live trade to keep the dead trade alive. So even though, Deputy Cahill, that the numbers are quite small at maybe only 200,000 animals out of 1.7 million slaughtered, that's still 9 to 10% of the total. That's enough to keep the trade honest. It's enough to keep another bidder for animals. And, you know, we need to expand on that. If again I bring in there, the North African markets are really the only markets, Deputy Cahill, for those older type of animals. Those larger, maybe 1 to 18 months to 2-month-old bulls or bullocks. In the past, for example, in 1994, we exported live 250,000 Frisian bullocks out of Ireland. Just that category alone. And that's ignoring the weanlings and the calves going to the veal units. I think the figure was in excess of 400,000 that year for total. So that was a fantastic source of competition to have. And I'm sure you remember yourself, Deputy Cahill, probably selling animals that ultimately ended up for that boat. It was great to have that extra source of competition there and to remove that poor quality, for want of a better phrase. But it probably is a poor phrase, because the North Africans don't have a problem with that animal, and in their eyes it's quite a reasonable one.
Poor conformation is better than poor quality.
Sorry?
Poor conformation.
Thank you for correcting me on that, Deputy Cahill. Yes. I think so, yes.
Correct.
We
won't expand on that.
Put them on a frying pan, you won't notice much difference.
Okay.
The Board B issue, I would be the first to say that I think Board B is doing a great service to the country on a national level. But from the live export and the live trade issue, even though they do represent us in that and are supposed to actually look for new markets, and to be fair, they do. In the veal units of Holland, They are very visible in their promotion for Irish livestock, but they most definitely need to do more. And I contend it's a bit of a difficulty maybe for Origin Green and to square with the promotion of live exports, because we have so many enemies to live exports. The NGOs and some consumers of Irish product are quite happy to consume Irish beef, but they wouldn't be that happy to promote and endorse live exports. And therefore, you know, it's a difficult line maybe Bord B is walking there, but I do believe that they need to put more resources towards this and in some way promote live exports across the world for us. But I mean, across the world really means North Africa and some of the Balkan states like Turkey and beyond. But they do need to put a bigger effort into that because of what's happening with Brexit. They're supposed to represent all beef and sheep, be that dead or alive, and perhaps they need to be better resourced in that regard. The max calves exported in any particular week, I don't have that figure to the top of my account, I'm afraid. I don't have it off. I have a figure in my mind, but it might be incorrect. I think it was somewhere about 13,000. But again, I think that's only maybe a guess on my behalf, and maybe Seamus will have a better good feel on that. Deputy Kenny, then, what's the additional time, rest areas, or what's the penalty? Again, maybe Seamus can answer this better, but there are fixed penalties being issued to hauliers that breach the time regulations as part of the EU regulation. And I think from memory it's roughly €500 per breach, but that accumulates if they're caught repeatedly. And you know, that was the issue that has led maybe to us discussing it here. There was a change not so long ago, about a year and a half ago, perhaps 2 years ago. It wasn't a problem for the hauliers to actually make it to the next layerage point. But with the change in legislation, that completely undermined that. So therefore the change in legislation has led to this particular issue occurring now. It didn't happen in the past.
Is it the time from the leaves the port here till it gets to the layerage? Is that the time that's measured?
Defer to James.
It's 919 for the time that it leaves Ireland, right? You have 19 hours to feed the calves, right? So you can drive for 9, stop for 1 and drive for 9. When you're on the ferry now, you're on the ferry for 16 hours, yeah? So it's 16, 17 hours. When you come off the ferry, then you have to go to the nearest point to feed the calves. Yeah. So roughly 19 hours you have. From the time you leave Ireland till you get to France. The minute you get to France, you have 19 hours. That's your travel time all over Europe. If you're travelling anywhere in Europe, you can travel 919. You drive for 9 hours, you stop for 1, and you can drive for 9 again, and then you must hit the destination. If you don't hit destination in 19 hours, you have to stop again, rest again for, you have to rest and feed the calves, stop for 12 hours and continue on.
Just to finish off then, Deputy, you're kind of on the boat issues then for maybe the export, which dovetails in with Deputy Cahill's issue on the North African trade. There were only a small number of boats that actually jumped through the hoops of EU registration and EU approval. And that is small. It's only 3 to 4 boats that actually are licensed to be able to take the animals out. And there's various stringent parameters there. They have to be stable, etc. So the number of boats are quite small, and those boats are off various parts of the world, live exporting throughout the globe. So sometimes getting your hands on them is quite difficult. And the number that will actually comply with the EU legislation and our own department standards is quite small. But still they're there. But ultimately that trade only occurs when it's economic to do so. And the levels sometimes that those North African countries can pay sometimes is quite poor. And then you have issues of credit and letters of credit to be generated, and some of these North African countries over the recent past have been politically unstable, should I say, as what happened to the Turkish market. The Turkish market was showing plenty of promise for us up until a year and a half ago when the currency took its particular nosedive. So do we have home markets for these animals? Currently no. We don't have a well-developed veal industry. The Dutch have, because they have it's been a tradition with them. They have ready access to the raw material to feed these animals, such as milk powders, and we don't have that tradition here. But again, just the core point here is the suggestion that the EU may ban the complete live transport of animals from the EU to third country markets. That needs to be resisted with the assistance of this committee back up to the Department of Agriculture and beyond in Europe. because that's the thin end of the wedge as far as the NGOs are concerned. If they got the banning of live transport of animals from the EU to third countries, we lose our North African markets, the potential there. We lose the Turkish market. And they're being lost. Why? They're being lost because there isn't a consistency across the EU 27 to enact a law we have there since 2005. At the Bulgarian border, it's well advertised. That's the flashpoint with the third country of Turkey. So the combination of Turkey and their issues and the control posts have now led to the notion that we should simply ban all transport of live animals, all because one member of the EU has a difficulty, and it has an internal difficulty in manning its own control points. That all of a sudden could mean we'd lose the transport within the EU, and I would contend that would be the thin end of the wedge, because these NGOs would be delighted if we banned that. They could then go after banning the live transport of animals full stop. In their mind, they have this notion it's all integrated, an animal shouldn't move unless it's going direct to slaughter, or in their mind they don't want them slaughtered at all, and that's fine if that's their belief. But ultimately is that's going to annihilate farming as we know it in Ireland if you have this maybe integrated approach that you can't transport an animal.
There's two further questions there that came up. The contingency plan for bad weather and the issue of exporting, live exports of bigger cattle. I think reference to maybe bulls. I think Deputy Cahill might have mentioned bulls, or somebody else might have mentioned bulls. You only deal with calves, I take. Is that it, Mr.
No,
Scout?
I do weanlings as well, but mostly calves is our big thing, yeah.
Okay. And is there a market, would you say, for bulls or bigger livestock?
Well, the bigger livestock, like the weanlings that was going up to 400 and 500 kilos to Turkey, right? That was a good market that was there. But then to do with the currency and different problems that's going on in that country, that whole business has collapsed, right? But we need to. One question there we need to go back on. The problem about England, right? We had a good market in England years ago, and as time progressed here with the movements of cattle, and that you can't send Irish cattle into England and get them killed in the slaughterhouses in England, yeah? And vice versa, that you can't bring English cattle into Ireland and get them slaughtered, right? Now, I can't understand this because of, if we go to Spain, we're sending Irish calves out to Spain, and Spain takes in maybe from 8 or 10 different countries, and Holland the same, and it doesn't make any difference where the calves come from, yeah? But yet, or the cattle come from, but yet we go to England and we can't get our cattle killed. Now, this was a traditional thing that we could boat the cattle over to England, or we could go by ferry. And this has all been stopped in the last few years, right? I can't understand why this was stopped, right? That our cattle can't cross the border into Northern Ireland and get killed, or the English or the Northern Ireland cattle can't come south to get killed. But yet, when the factories are short of cattle in the north, they will come south and buy the cattle, yeah, and bring them up to the north, right? So I can't understand why this trade has all been stopped. What has hampered this business from going on? Because in England, they will take the store cattle, and there's a big market for the store cattle there, for these bulls, for these heifers and all, yeah? And the market is there. But the market is, whether it's controlled or who's controlling the market, it's there to be seen.
Region bull wetlands, is there a market for them? And how far is your destination from Sherbrooke for every calf?
Well, with the Frisian bulls, Jackie, Spain will take the Frisian bulls, right, up to a certain size, yeah, up to sort of 200 kilograms, yeah. After that, they don't want to take them because the feeding in Spain is so much cheaper than the feeding here. Labour is cheaper, electricity, everything to do, and the weather is different, the climate is different, right? So they can feed the cattle a lot cheaper than we can, right? So they're only interested in the cattle up to a certain weight. For us to export the Frisian bulls, right, we must look to the North African countries to do that, yeah. Even the other country, because the industry for the Holstein cattle, the Frisian cattle in Ireland have got worse and worse and worse, right? And it's only that our cattle, that we were able to get the calves away, that we'd be in a serious trouble, yeah? And the other thing what I say about the about the 30 or not the 30-day move, the 4 movements, right? Okay, these movements where if you have movements on your cattle, right, you are penalised maybe 70 or 80 euros. I'm not sure exactly how much it is, right? Your cattle is worth that much less because the supermarkets don't want the cattle moving in this country for hundreds of years, right? The farming sector has moved their cattle. Some people keep the cattle for 6 months, as you know yourself. They sell them on. The next guy gets them for 6 months and he sells on. This is creating a lot of money, is stirring for the local communities. People are buying different things, right? All this has been stopped. We can't sell our cattle. Really, what the factories are looking for: bred on the farm, fed on the farm, and sold into the meat plants, right? We have to look at all this. There is a monopoly here about these movements, and we have to look into this very, very carefully. What is the problem here? You go to, I noticed there are people buying weanings to go to Spain at the moment, right? If there's 4 movements on it, it doesn't matter what movements is on the cattle, right? The cattle just go on. They've never heard of it. Ireland and England is the only 2 countries in the 27 EU countries, right, that has this movement issue, right, about the 4 movements, right? It's nowhere else in the whole European Union, right? And I believe that this is a big factor as well in people in this country rearing the calves and rearing the cattle, because there's such an emphasis that if that animal moves 4 times, right, there is 70 or 80 pound, 70 or 80 euros taken off the price of the animal. Yeah, and going back to this gentleman here, he asked a question about the ships going to a different port in France, right? Yes, we can go to different ports, and we can make it happen that we can get to the other lairies in time, but there's no ships there to do it. These ferries, like as in Irish ferries, as in Stena, they're not over interested in the cattle for the peak times. It's only for the peak times there. They're bringing all these lorries over, backwards and forwards, and all transport over to France, and they're going on to different destinations. So to go to another port with, say, 5 or 6 or 10 trucks of calves won't pay them. Yeah, and like there is I see down the line that we're going to have a lot of problems with the export of the calves, right? With the animal, these animal angels or animal rights or whatever you like to call them, right? That it's going to put a lot of problems onto the business. And if we don't all work together and put a lot of pressure in Europe, right, we are going to have a serious problem coming down the line here. And it's not in 10 years' time. This will be here in 1 or 2 years' time.
Okay, and in regards to bad weather contingency plans, what do you think?
The contingency plan that I'd like to see, I would like to see the Department of Agriculture, right, looking up this lairage that's 4 hours away, right, that when the bad weather comes here, that we can open that up in the state of there's a problem here, that bad weather comes, we've 3 times the amount of calves go out that week, right?
So a lairage in Ireland?
No, the lairage in Ireland, no, the lairage in France, I'm speaking, the contingency plan. Okay. It's not a problem about in Ireland, right? It's the problem when we get to the far side, right? Yeah, that's what we're saying. The welfare of the calves here in Ireland is when the calves don't go out, right, we have an issue here, because are these farms capable of handling all these calves when the cows are all calving? Yeah, so we need to be moving these as quick as we can, right? The other thing in regards to the exports as well, which I think is a point that we should have been consulted about, the people that's in the exporting business, and we never were asked anything about it, was a plan come in here that the calves could be sold at 10 days old, right? So these calves are entering the market system at 10 days old, and they're being bought, whether it's by the exporters, and held for 4 days, because you cannot ship calves in Europe unless they're 14 days old. Yeah, you can't ship them anywhere through the whole of Europe, right? But in Holland, the rules are, if I'm right about this, is 15 days the calves are sold at, right? And we must bring a plan in here on welfare to show the other countries that we're not selling these calves at a very young age, that we're keeping them, to give them a chance that they'll be able to travel, that there should be legislation brought in that no calf is sold on these 15 days old in the markets. And it is better for everybody, for the health of the calf and all of it. Yeah. But a lot of these rules, we're not getting consulted about or asked our opinion on it, and this is why that we must form an association that we can speak to the right authorities to say, well, we have to find a way about which is the way that we can get around, not to get around it.
Yeah,
but
and going back to this association that you talk about, and I mentioned myself, you know, is it not incumbent on yourselves as exporters to come together to form that group, that you can deal directly then as an organisation, that you have your representatives, be it yourself or whoever else, that you can deal directly then with the Department of Agriculture, with whoever else?
It's very, very important that we form this group, yeah?
Okay.
And we're working on it at the moment, and we're hoping to have a meeting next Sunday,
okay,
right? Because everyone is busy all week at the markets and different things like that. And we hope to start doing something after Sunday about the group. And, yeah, we should have had it a long time ago,
okay,
right? And then we can express our feelings or whatever, our thoughts to the department and say, well, this is not workable. We can sit down and we say, we have to find another way of doing this to see how we can work to keep the flow of calves moving.
Okay. Now, next is Deputy Fitzmaurice.
Thanks for your presentation. Seamus, just to clarify, this new rule is an EU rule, I presume, is it?
About the movement of calves from have to stop in Cherbourg.
Yeah.
That actually rule was there, I suppose, all the time, but it wasn't enforced, right? The rule of 919 was that from the time the animals leave Rosslare Harbour, right, you have 19 hours to get to the feeding stations to feed them, right? So normally when we were leaving and coming out to Cherbourg, when the first two stations was full, we were able to go on to the next station. We were proceeding on to the next station.
What has changed?
What has changed now is, right, that in France, some trucks were followed, right, and these people, these animal rights, were saying that the calves travelled an extra 3 or 4 hours, right, and it's not fair to the calves, and the journey is too long, and the trucks that was carrying them broke the EU regulations.
Right. So you correctly, but you asked a question earlier on. I think I'll answer that for you. About the problem with us not being able to get cattle killed in Northern Ireland.
Sorry?
You spoke earlier on about our problem of getting cattle killed in England
and
in Northern Ireland. I'll answer that for you. It is my view that there are certain monopolies there that is preventing Irish beef, and no more than the 30 months and all the different regulations. If they're stuck for cattle, they couldn't give a damn if there were 40 months, and if they have plenty of cattle, then there's a problem with everything. In the line of the movements, would you agree that, and to Ray as well, would you agree that B&B shouldn't be a movement, and would you agree that when they go to marts and maybe not sold, that these are movements in Ireland that we could actually help? You are right in saying, Ray, that the food chain in England has put stipulations on us, but there are a certain amount of movements, I think, or would there be an idea that should be looked at, that if a farmer is Board B approved and the farmer that the animal came from, that then it runs in line, that because they're running at the same regulations, that we need to look at that with the department in some way. To Seamus, are you saying that we need to, that the Department of Agriculture, it would be advisable that they would come in with you to try and look at alternative accommodation in France? As you've rightly pointed out, the next 2 months, or from February to April, is when you're going to get the glut of calves. Is there a problem in getting, and this is probably in sending out, say, stronger cattle than calves, is there a problem in getting sort of licences and paperwork in order? Do you be held up here? And thirdly, Board B, a straight question to you, Seamus, have they ever, because the meat factories are brought out on trade missions, have they ever brought ye, as exporters of live cattle, on trade missions to other countries to promote the say, cattle on the hoof, we'll call them, going out to those other countries?
Okay. Right. The answer to that question is, right, there's a chosen few brought. Yes, that is the answer to that question. What the chairman said, that I have to be careful about what I say or things, right? But I feel, right, and I have to be very honest about it, as we are in the business for the last 20 years, right, I feel that I pay my levies to Board B every week, and I feel that Board B does nothing for me. It's a waste of my money. It's a waste for the exporters, right? Okay, and I feel that we have to look at something different, right? Because the mindset of Board B is on the beef industry, right, and sell the beef. It's nothing to do with the exports, right? And they're not there to do anything with exports. I'm getting no help from Board B, right? And between off-farm sales and what went through our books this year, we're talking 40,000 calves, the guts of it, right? Okay, but I'm getting no help. One issue arose that I waited. I requested information from Poland to meet some people in Poland, and I waited for 6 weeks where the email went to the wrong address, right, for people to come back to me to meet Polish people to sell them the calves, because there's a market there. But I waited 6 weeks, and then it got over the time. It was not good to me. Personally, myself, I think that we have to look at a lot different things. Yes, they're good for the beef industry, right? But for the exports, my opinion is they are no help to me.
Are we capable, Seamus, and this is a sort of supplementary question to you, I know that you said 1.7 million cattle and 2.4 that are born in a year in Ireland calves. The reality of it is, and the dog on the street knows, that once we go over 30,000 of a kill each week, we're in trouble. They can pull your trousers down in the factory for the simple reason the farmer is left with a lower price. That's the facts of that. Whether we like that or whether we don't, we see it. It's a stated fact what happens. Are we capable of, or what amount of cattle are we capable of between calves and bigger cattle? What's the potential? This is what I want to know. Are we to look at the figures you've talked about there, it's like 2.4 million as again 1.7, so you're talking about 700,000 cattle. Are we capable of pushing that up more between calves, weanlings, say the Frisian bullocks or bulls that went out that'll be over a year and a half? Are we capable of going for is there more markets out there that we could try and keep sort of the weighing scale levelled to keep an even price, in my view, for the cattle that's being killed in this country?
The answer is yes. There's a lot of potential there, but the potential is not being looked for. There's serious amount of business to be done there if we have the right people working for us. If we had the right committee lined up, that we could put somebody in place for to look at these different countries, right? My feeling about all this is, right, it's very, very hard to have your foot in two camps. You can't be working for the meat industry and you can't be working for the exports, right? You can't do the two things, right? So you need a body of people that's able to look at the exports of the cattle, right? And there is a lot of potential in the Balkans and places like that for the cattle, and into Poland, right? And the biggest industry we lost here, we lost it 4 years ago, right? We were sending a market of calves out to Holland. They were called rosé calves, 4 to 5 weeks old, yeah? And our calves was entering into Holland every week. And the next thing, because of these were calves 4 and 5 years, roughish calves, not real sweet ones, like, you know, they were growing out of baby size, right? And they weren't really good enough for the Spanish market, but they were very good for the Dutch market. And the next thing, we were going every week with the calves, and then the calves ended up, because of the TB in Ireland, they made restrictions in Holland that all Irish calves that go to Holland, once they enter the feeding, once they enter the rearing sheds, they can't leave. These calves that we're speaking about, these rosé calves, they were going for they were going to be reared at 10 weeks old and then shipped on to some other part of Holland or sent into Germany for it to be fattened and sold at 12 months old. We lost that market, and that's a market we never should have lost, right? That was a very important market to the Frisian calves, because it kept the price of the calves up in Spain. Them older calves is making the Spanish market a better market for us to go. Now all them extra calves have to go to Spain. So what the moral of the story is, our calves going to Holland can't move out of the units to go into. When they go into them units, they're there until they're dead at a year old, until they're killed, right? Because of the TB issue. So that's the problem in Holland. The problem with the other markets, there's not problems with other markets because you can move and you can sell the cattle. We have to look at the thing about looking for ships as 2 or 3 ships is no good. We need to have 5 or 6 or 7 ships or 10 ships that are passed here in Ireland, them ships can be fault, as Ray said, that them ships can be called on at any time to come here. The potential is there. We have the livestock to ship. We have the capabilities. We have the best animal welfare in the whole of the European Union, right? Second to none. We can't ask, I have to say that we can't say that the department don't, people say that about the certification and things like that. Any certification that we went to look for off the department, they were more than fair to try and facilitate us to do it, and have been more than helpful, right? Only this issue we have now at the moment, right? But the biggest problem that we have to look at, and I see about, is this 4 movements. Because what's going to happen in rural Ireland and in Ireland is, right, that a lot of people that's in this whole game in Ireland is getting less and less and less. Because if I buy a calf in the market system and I bring it home and then I resell that to the farmer, that's 2, 3 movements, right? The owner, the mart, and myself. Isn't that correct, is it?
Yeah, the mark's not counted.
No, the mart. It's 2 movements.
No, the mark's not counted.
Yeah, and then I go on to the third guy. Go on to the guy that's feeding the animal for a couple of months, right, or for 5 or 6 months, and he sells it again. Then we're into the issues of the 4 movements, and then we lose all we lose whatever profit is in them. So it's not economical to buy the cattle. So the biggest thing is we have to look at the 4 movements. That's one, as the exports as well. That's another thing we must be looking at.
You mentioned other ships there, Mr. Scanlon. Yeah. You know, we're obviously, and you obviously are depending on a commercial enterprise.
Yes.
Obviously, the owners of the ships will only be able to avail if they make money, I presume.
Correct.
It has to be viable and economical for them.
Yes.
So, is it economical for them to have more ships available?
No, what I'm actually saying, Chairman, what I'm actually saying is, right, that the people with those ships, they should have the licence. The ship should be licensed, even if they're not coming into Ireland, even if they're only wanted 3 times a year, that the licence is put on them from the Irish government. But the Irish government have to license the ships for to come into Ireland.
Yeah. Would they have to apply for to be assessed?
Yes.
To obviously get that licence.
They have, yeah.
And they may not be prepared to go on that road. Would that be true?
I'd say there's ships there that people. I think there's one vet here that he goes out, and I think 1 or 2 guys, they go out and they pass the ships to go to different countries to pass them. Yes, I think they have to be asked first. Yeah,
but the point I'm making, I suppose, is these ships are obviously transporting other stuff.
Yes, all over
the world. Be it cars or whatever else around the world. And there's not obviously...
No, these are, sorry, excuse me, these are walk-on ships we're speaking about.
Okay.
Walk-on ships. Okay. So the cattle walk on them. There's no trucks or anything on them. They just walk on.
And what other items would they be normally used for?
No, just for the cattle.
Just for the cattle?
Cattle or sheep.
Okay. So they would be lying up then?
No, they would be all working over in Australia and different countries, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. These trucks are maybe South America and all, yeah.
Okay. All right. But it depends on, it'll be up to the owner of these ships to get licensed?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Just to clarify that. Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Daly is next, please.
Yeah. Chair, and my apologies, we had a vote, and I've only a couple of brief questions, and if they were covered already, I'll accept that while we were out. Going back to the initial discussion you had about the lairage, and you said you were out in France and you explained what's there at the minute, and you suggested that it would be feasible or viable, or maybe the right thing to do for the farm organisations or even the department, maybe to secure further lairage out there.
Yes.
How far did you get with them conversations, or where is it at? Firstly, and I'll finish the question before I want to go a step further. Like all business, it's based on supply and demand, and you seem confident that if you had the facilities and the lairage and everything at hand, that you could get rid of 200,000 or more calves in a given year. So where are your customers picking up the shortfall that you can't supply them because of the regulations, the restrictions? And where I'm coming from at in asking that question is, if they're getting it difficult to source other suppliers to bridge the gap of what you can't supply them because of regulation, would they be interested in getting involved in part funding additional lairage, or are they able to get their calves easy enough elsewhere when you can't supply them? If you know where I'm coming from, would there be a possibility there? I'd like to hear how you got on with your discussions on this side, but based on that, would there also maybe be a possibility, if they really need the calves badly enough and they need them arriving, meeting all the regulations and meeting all the health and welfare regulations, that they might be prepared to contribute or facilitate a lairage system somewhere along the line? And my second question is, and I know it's Brexit aside, can you just explain to me the land bridge and the time with regard to the regulations, if you haven't done already? How does the land bridge compare with, say, for Northern Europe, a place like that? Compared to the boat going to Cherbourg, if your calves are going then north again, how does bringing them across England, the land bridge by lorry, how does that fit into your whole timescale and regulation? Is it a runner or not? Yep. As I say, Brexit aside, because there may not be a land bridge, as we know, but we'll leave that out for the moment. But how does it compare time-wise within the regulations that you have to meet, the 919 or whatever, going for Northern Europe across by land? Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Next questioner is Senator Mulhern.
Thank you. Just to pick up on a point, Mr Doyle, that you made, which is pointing out the fact that there's a glut of 6 to 8 weeks where there's a real problem, and that's why you're saying, you know, it's maybe more in our interest to try and sort it than in the interest of a private business person in France to expand capacity just to suit us. But is it not correct that there's a capacity issue anyway there? Because if we really want to ramp up live exports, we don't have that capacity. I mean, we need to do a lot more live exports than we're actually doing now to address the problems around the numbers of calves that we have to deal with here. So there is in effect a capacity issue to allow us to grow our exports the way we need. Is that a fair assessment of what you've described? And I suppose I shall continue, yeah?
Yeah, carry on, yeah.
And I know, again, as Senator Daly has said, maybe some of this has been answered, but I think, Mr Scallon, you obviously put great emphasis on the fact you have customers, you have ships, you have everything. The problem is the lairage facilities. In relation to the markets, are you saying that the way things are, that there's a demand out there that we're not meeting? And what particular countries or markets is that happening in? And how much are we missing out on? Are you in a position, or maybe Mr Doyle is in a position to quantify, because we are looking to export more live animals, and are we missing opportunities right now because of, the constraints that you have described? And there was a couple. Oh yes, I just wanted to ask this one, just to understand. You're an exporter, so at what point are you finished with the job of exporting? Like you bring them to the lairage and you bring them onward on their onward journey, or is it that somebody else picks them up, or how does it generally work? Or like you have contracts with people and they're are they flexible contracts where that, well, actually, if I could have 4,000 calves every day, if I had the entire exclusive use of a ship then and the lairage, well, I could meet that demand? Are you talking about something like that? And I suppose the other thing is, it seems that the main emphasis here has been put on expanding the lairage as a solution. Are there other parts of the solution, like, just to be clear, as we go forward, what we need to do to address the problem and to increase live exports in actuality and increase our capacity to deal in live exports and increase numbers. Thanks.
Thanks, Senator. Deputy Healy-Rae.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say that I'm very glad and delighted, and thank you very much for coming in here today, both Ray and Seamus and Elizabeth, to talk about this very important matter for that farmers down our way anyway in Kerry are very concerned about, and especially when you're talking about calves from the dairy herd. From dairy herds that are they seem to be increasing year on year now, and especially I suppose since Simon Coveney back in 2013 advised farmers that they should increase milk production. So if we increase dairy cows, we're going to increase that type of calf, and like Ray said, to protect or to ensure that we have a vibrant dead trade, you need to have a good live trade, and it's a big issue. There's a lot of meetings at the present time by farmers and this at beef, this new phenomenon of this beef plan, and the big topic all the time is the dairy calves and the export for them. So we're delighted to have you here and to see face to face, because it's so important, and the issue you raise about the layerage, whose responsibility, or how can Ireland, how can the government, how can the minister, how can we as politicians do anything to help you with the layerage in another country? Or that it seems to me that if that was dealt with, that you could take more calves out of the country. So how that's the nub of the question. How can we help you in that regard, or can we help at all? Right. That's my question, and depending what answer you give me, I might just...
We'll come back. We can come back again to you with more questions. Right. Deputy O'Keefe, before I come back to the witnesses.
John, thank you, and I welcome the representatives here today. You know, I come from an area that's very dependent on this business, really, from this time of the year, we're coming to the peak season of calving season. Chair, the question I want to ask, and I have been watching this closely, the proceedings of the day, and you touch on the issue of the layerage, right? But the question I want to ask you is, you agreed to the 12-hour rest period, right? Get the calf, get nourishment, food and that, chance to lie down and rest, right? And after that, then, you could take off on a journey of 10 hours or 20 hours, right? My question is, why we want so much about the calf having a rest, so long a rest? Does the calf need 12 hours rest? Because it's a contradiction, you can open a 20-hour journey, the calf on an empty stomach. If you want to be blunt, So I just thought, maybe, do we need the 12 hours, and maybe get out the layerage after 5 or 6 hours, And I think the calf's welfare would be actually better maintained, because at least he'd have some bit of nourishment. You'll be travelling on an empty stomach after 12 hours, So that's the concern, is, and that could up the turnover. But the question I'm asking through the chair is, could we not allow the movement of the livestock sooner than the 12 hours? Do we need the 12 hours? Is it right to have 12 hours? Even the animal welfare people must understand, that you can give them 12 hours lying down, and then get him off into the loader and the horse, or the cattle box, and travel on an empty stomach. It's a contradiction. Should we not allow the animal to move within 5 or 6 hours? If you're going to Australia, Chairman, in the morning, right, you stop over in the midday somewhere, you'd be happy just to get out and walk around for a couple of hours, wouldn't you, and get on the flight again? You don't want to be hanging around all day, keep the show going, So, thank you.
Well, the key point in all this discussion is, if we don't want to do anything, or we don't want to say anything here that's going to have a negative effect on live exports either. I think that's a crucial point here.
Yeah. Okay.
In general, and not be critical, okay. not Mr. Scanlon.
Mr. Daly here, about the Dutch or the Spanish people putting money into the layerage in France, right? if you ask them to do things like that, they'd only laugh at you because they're buying cattle in all other countries, right? Okay, they tell us we want 500 or we want 2,000 calves this week, right? They're not interested in where I feed them, what I do with them. All they are interested, what price I can supply them, quality calves, healthy calves, and get them to destination. It's all down to a financial thing, right? And the welfare issue, right? Now, the thing about the other question you asked me about, sorry, with that question, we feel that we're shipping the calves from Ireland, right? And the farmers and exporters and all, and whatever it is, we should be looking at building the sheds because we want to sell a product, right? So they're buying the product. So it is up to us to look in to see what way we can help. The issue we have here, and we can speak all day about them, is right, the contingency plan to get the calves for the 6-week period. And this is what Mr. Doyle has said here as well. We need to get those calves out. We need to get something done immediately, that we have a plan there, that those calves, if the weather is bad or whatever, that we can get them moved up and that we can get the lairage capacity increased. To where these people in Holland and in Spain are getting the calves, right? The calves are coming from Lithuania, Latvia, they're coming from Germany, yeah? And everyone says about that the Irish calves are so good and this is so good. I've seen the German calves and I've seen the Lithuanian, the Latvian calves, and they're every bit as good as the Irish calves, right? But the Irish calves are healthy and they're different calf, right? They're better bred, but there's no difference in it when you look at them, right? But sorry, I just went off the mark there a minute, there, right? Where they were getting the calves from. The calves coming from Germany will come 45, 50, 40 weeks of the year. They need them in Ireland then for 10 or 12 weeks, right, the baby calves, right? And then after that, it's okay. You can come, or it's not a big issue. When the calves start coming again in Germany, then they start taking the calves from Germany again, right? But they're only interested in our calves, we say, really and truly, when the calves are scarce as well, yeah? But if we had a plan that the calves was going on a weekly basis or there was something like that, then they would set up a feeding plan to take our calves the whole time, yeah? But we only have the calves leaving Ireland for, I suppose, really and truly for 20 weeks. So,
I suppose people were trying to, a lot of dairy farmers were told compact calving, and this is what's like led to this to smasher. Like there's so much calves on the ground for a 3-month period. Like it's not spread out for the 52 weeks of the year. So like with the contingency plan is we kind of just need to make something that we as the farming community can get these calves out of here.
For use for 10 weeks, that's just you're saying to us.
Yes.
At max, but only at peak for 6 weeks.
And that's why all the excess calves were going to the overflow lairage 4 hours away, and there was never an issue. We always complied with that.
So ask a man to invest in that kind of accommodation.
Yeah, it's not.
For 6 weeks, it's yeah.
And through the chair, how did you get on when you came back that time? You said you talked to the farm bodies and the department and your fellow exporters about us or them collectively investing in additional areas. How far did you get in them?
Well, what I actually said when I came back, I met farming bodies and I said that we have to look at to see that if we're paying €1.90 to Board Bia, that we should be looking at this money being put in to set up a lairage in France, that this money should be put into that end of things, right? Okay, and I made a few suggestions about different things about the export and where we should go, right? But they said that wouldn't be a non-runner because it's a government body, right? And are they going to put money into something like this? But it was too late to go do anything about it. You know what I mean? We had 4 or 5 months we could have done something. Got some sort of as Ray said, that all we need is a shed because the paperwork is done in Ireland, right? All the travelling plans, everything's done. We just need a place to rest and feed the calves, right? It's not rocket science what we're looking for, yeah?
Yeah, but they also said when we were in France that like if we went to go look to build something or do anything, they will flatly just say no, because we're not French, we haven't lived in the area for 10 years.
Bordbia collected around 250 to 160,000 last year from the levy on calf exports.
Yeah. Yeah, more. No more than over 3. There was 166,000 calves went out at nearly €2. 300,000.
So where I'm coming from, again to the chair, there was no buy-in. You were knocked flat back, and that's all. Like, while you didn't have the time to have it in place for this year, there's still no contingency plan to have it for next year. You have a full year till next year, but there's not, and it fell flat. So there's no plan.
What was actually said to me, I was speaking to people who they have been trying, like IFA have put a good bit of work in now to try and get things done. They have, right? But the problem is, it's 2020 now. We're going to get something done for it, not now. Yeah, it's now we need it, because it's now we need it. Ray will be able to tell you about the market system and different things like that. How much calves is coming on the market? That's his field, right? Which is coming through, and what calves is going to come through now at the moment. And there need to be something done with them, because they're not wanted in Ireland, right? And we have to find out. And there should have been something put in place, right? I also went to the Department of Agriculture and I said the problem was coming, right? I did tell them. I've told everybody that the problem is coming since October. And I feel that, I suppose because we had no representation as a body of exporters, that we couldn't get anything done. Maybe if we had been standing as a one, we would have been able to get something done about it, yeah. But it's here on top of us now. Now we must organise to get something done very, very quick. We need some.
Sorry if we're going to watch you, Mr. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay, so
Mr. Doyle.
Well, Chairman, just to add to a few of those points. Yeah, one of the problems we have is the way our dairy industry is now evolved, and we're predominantly grass-based and we're extremely seasonal. So we're going to have the guts of 700,000 calves born this February out of the total 2.4 million, whereas it links into some of our competitors across Europe. They're calving all year round. They don't have this big bulge of calves to deal with, and they're transporting them small distances. If you've calves from Germany ending up in the veal lots in Holland, they're only on the truck for 4 or 5 hours. So they've no problem complying with the 919 regulations. The issue of the 12-hour stop, that's an EU regulation, so we can't get away from leaving the calves for the 12 hours. We can't change that one. Deputy Mulhern asked me, like, do we need more markets? Of course we do. You know, Deputy Fitzmaurice clearly stated that, you know, once we've gone over 30,000 animal slaughter per week, we have a price. We're price takers at farm level. We've been at 40,000 a week for maybe 4 or 5 months of this year, and you can see the weakness in the beef price there. The same thing, that is the issue with these calves. We could do with every single market we have to try and bring the market back to equilibrium, which is to go to veal units, they go as an older calf to Spain, they go maybe as an older animal again to North Africa. We need to develop them all and keep them all as much as we can, which is one of my points about Bordbia. They need to probably best resource live exports, because I don't know what portion of their overall budget they actually put towards live exports. And maybe that needs a fresh look from Bordbia's point of view, is to put... So could I, Deputy, but I don't think I chance it. Is that, you know, that most definitely needs urgent a look at from them, because, as I said, I think they're conflicted from an organisation point of view, and they're looking over their shoulders no more than we are, and NGOs and vegans and vegetarians, and how best to navigate that. And live exports is a hot potato for an awful lot of people to deal with at the moment, and we're trying to navigate this with our discussion here today. Again, this issue in Cherbourg is just one small issue of the symptom of we need to remove as many animals as we can off our island. And we're unique in that. I mean, as I said in my opening address, 90% of our cattle, and less so the sheep, have to find a home somewhere else. They have to be consumed somewhere other than our island. We're unique in that. Every other European country more or less consumes what it produces. So we're always going to be caught at a political end on rules and regulations with transport. And just finally, just to wrap up, because if I forget the point, this issue on the transport is one of non-conformance throughout the entire EU. But we have unilateral decisions by some member states to even trump it. For example, you're not allowed 3 decks of calves transiting through Holland. You're not allowed 2 decks of animals that are over 6 months of age in Holland, and they've just decided to do that for their own benefit, going further and beyond EU legislation on animal welfare. This is just a natural progression we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to deal with increased bars on animal welfare. We have no problem with complying with what we have there. It's just this particular one issue in Cherbourg is a symptom of our expansion, our seasonality, and the fact that it's maybe not economic for this lairage to be run in a fashion that we'd so like it, and increased monitoring of current EU regulation. Because, as I said, if we go back 2-3 years ago, there was no problem with our transporters going direct to Holland, but that was probably wrong, because they were breaching legislation.
Deputy Cahill.
But I don't fully agree with you with the welfare standards, because we're meeting very exacting standards as it is. Like, if they put welfare standards to a higher, the economics of export and then goes out the window. Like, we changed our lorries, as I said earlier, 10 or 12 years ago, at huge expense. Like, our cars are arriving out in perfect condition now, our wagoners are arriving out in perfect condition. Like, there's a time to say, you know, they're able to lie down their lorries, they're comfortable, they're ventilated, they have water, they have everything on the lorries travelling. Like, and if we give in to the demand saying, you know, you have to increase the standards, the handbrake is going to come up at some stage in, and it won't be economical to get them there. So I'd be very much holding ground. What we're doing is, the calf is arriving in perfect condition out there. We're an island country, we're the only island country within the EU. We have to travel, and I think once we're getting our calf there in good condition, I think we want to say, you know, enough is enough.
Chairman, if I can respond to that, I couldn't agree with you more. My point was maybe misunderstood. We have certain countries within the EU deciding to trumpet and go beyond this. We're fully compliant, and as I said in my opening address, I fully defend 1 of 2005 as being a perfect standard to ensure our good animal welfare. We're complying with it. We're happy to comply with it. But unfortunately, we have some countries taking a unilateral decision, and some consumers taking a unilateral decision to impose standards which I agree will be uneconomic for us to do. But again, we have to deal with the cards we have, and one of our issues at the moment is in Cherbourg. But our bigger issue is obviously in promoting live exports, to deal with the fact that we have increased our calf registrations by 400,000 in the last 5 years.
And it won't increase more.
And it will increase more, yes.
The whole problem we have is, back again,
Mr. Scannell, go ahead.
Sorry, that we have to get the plan in motion, and we need you chaps here, right, to push on that we have a contingency plan for the farmers of Ireland, right, to get the calves out. We need that plan, and we need that plan fast.
I think there's no doubt everybody's on the same page in that regard.
Yes.
If we haven't got live exports, we have a serious problem in this country. And it's a delicate subject, as Mr. Doyle and you all, obviously you're dealing with on a regular basis. It's a delicate subject. We are obviously complying with regulations. We have no problem with complying with regulations. But I think Mr. Doyle makes a valid point as regards what could be coming down the line. We need to be aware of that. But I think it's crucial that we can develop further markets going forward. You know, what we were doing here today is we're starting a process of the last number of weeks as regards the future of the beef sector. It's a huge question at the moment, and lots of people have plenty of opinions about it. There is no silver solution, as we all know, to the matter either, I think. But I think live exports are a crucial part of it. If we're going to be producing extra calves in this country, 300,000 and 400,000 calves on an annual basis over and above what we produced previously, there's only one way we have to manage that, is get them out of the country as quick as possible. So we have to do that obviously in as efficient way as possible and as economic way as possible as well. So this is a crucial sector of our industry at the moment that needs to be developed further, and your contribution here today is obviously very important to that, and we're delighted to have you here today to discuss this matter so that we can do our bit to move the whole thing forward. So, yeah.
I just asked for my own information. The comparisons, Brexit aside, of the land bridge, you're going by lorry across the UK as opposed to the Cherbourg route, especially for the calves going to Holland, North Europe. Just by comparison, how does it fit into the regulations?
Okay, no, we can go through England, right? But the problem of us going through England, we have more problems because last week, well, a couple of weeks ago, there was calves came from Scotland down, Scottish calves, and they were going out to Hartgate, is it?
Ramsgate.
Ramsgate, a couple of weeks ago, and the people, the animal rights were there, and they started banging the lorries and punching the lorries and throwing things at it and everything, right, of the calves going across. Now, if the Irish calves start travelling across in the UK, right, we will have great difficulties, right? Because the English have such a thing about the export of animals, of live animals, right? That most of the boats on the East Coast, right, naturally, they have to go to the East Coast. They won't take the Irish calves, right? P&O won't take calves on the boats going out of England. So it has to be either there's a little small boat that goes out of England there, out of Harwich. Is that right, sir?
No, Ramsgate.
Ramsgate. There's a little small boat, it only carries 6 loads of calves, right? But most of the shipping companies over there don't want to carry the calves because of the problem with the animal rights, right?
But would I be correct in saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that them people that are putting up them barriers for you are putting a longer journey on the Irish calf because of their protests?
We could
that
go...
actually they're having the opposite to the desired effect.
Yeah. I'll just give you an idea. If we went from Rosslare to Wales, right, it would take 3 hours on the ship. We cross England, it would take 6 hours, is 9 hours. And we get on the ship to go to France, right, another, say, 3 hours, right? In 12 hours we're out there. There'd be 7 to 8 hours of a difference in the calves going. Yeah.
So the animal rights people are blocking you going that
way. They're blocking us going through England.
And so you're going a 17-hour trip instead.
And also we have to be very careful with other people in it as well, that with the Irish calves going through it, that we have them problems. And we have to be said that we're blessed that we can go out of Rosslare and that we can go out of Dublin as well. But there was one point there, just in case you chaps, the wheelings that's leaving, the wheelings don't have to be there in 919. When the wheelings come off because they're of the age of them, when they come off the ferry in Cherbourg, they can travel on for another 10 hours to Larry's. So it's not the wheelings right that's blocking up the Larry's, you understand? The bigger cattle, they can travel on. It's the calves must come off, and the calves definitely need...
That's even worse for the economics of it, though, Seamus, isn't it? That's even worse for the economics of the man with the lairage.
Yeah.
The Waylands will bypass them in Cherbourg.
Yeah, but they have to go on to another lairage.
Yeah, I understand that, but they'll bypass Cherbourg. They'll stay going further.
Yeah, 12 hours. The 12 hours stopping, the senator, the 12 hours stopping is a very, very good thing that the calves stop to be rested. Need to be rested because they're of a young age, and for the welfare and to show that the other countries how good standards we have for resting them. But I think that's all EU legislation as well. If you travel for 18 hours, you have to stop and rest the calves. All calves have to be stopped and rested and fed.
Okay, any further questions? I suppose a couple of key points from today. Obviously, the importance of exports to the whole industry. The second point, I think, is that the lairage is obviously in Cherbourg a crucial point. And the third point, I'd say, is the importance of you having an umbrella organisation, if I could put it as such, so that you have a stronger voice when it comes to negotiating, whatever the case may be. I think there are 3 crucial points, if I could sum up our conversation here today.
I would say Board B as
sorry, absolutely.
percentage of their resources that's gone into establishing markets.
Correct, yeah, sorry, very true, Deputy Cahill. There are 4 key points, I think, if we could sum up our conversation here today. The importance of an industry could not be underestimated. If we were to get as many of our small stock calves out of the country to help the beef industry. So,
and the other thing that I just say again, just to say that we should look at see what can be done about us getting our store cattle into the UK. Like, it's a big thing for the market system in Ireland, where the cattle are all going through the markets and all, right, that if there was a market there for the calves, for the big cattle, which there is, right, that's all closed down, and it should be looked into to see what is the monopoly that has caused all that to close down.
Well, that's something that we can investigate as well in our deliberations.
Yeah.
So that concludes our conversation here today. Thank you very much for coming. I think it's been a very interesting and informative discussion. We'll be coming back to this issue over the next number of weeks, and you're more than welcome to tune into us over the next while. Thank you very much, Mr. Scallon, Elizabeth Scallon and Ray Doyle, for coming before us today and making a very important point and very important case for the whole industry as well. So thank you very much for coming before the committee. Members, this concludes the business for today, and we're adjourned until next Tuesday the 19th at 3:30 p.m. Thank you very much.